Did you know that whilst Kody Brown was desperately fighting to hold what remained of his fractured family together, defending Robyn at every turn against Christine, Yanel, and even Mary, court-sealed documents were quietly aging in a dusty courthouse in southern Utah, containing the one name she never wanted him to discover. For more than a decade, the public was fed a single narrative. Robyn was the victim, the peacemaker, the dutiful wife who honored Kody's vision when no one else would. But now the receipts have surfaced, and they don't merely weaken her story, they blast it wide open. We are talking court files, financial disclosures, allegedly concealed trusts, a mysteriously single-signed affidavit, and the most astonishing twist of all, Kody may not have been her only husband, not emotionally, not legally, and most certainly not financially. For the first time, unsealed legal records reveal that Robyn maintained extensive, documented ties to her ex long after she pledged her undying loyalty to Kody. These aren't mere whispers or fan theories. These are shared accounts, an undisclosed residence, and secret agreements Kody allegedly never laid eyes on until now. The woman he abandoned 3 wives for may never have truly severed herself from her past. And in this unfolding saga, across the next sessions, we will walk you through the legal timeline, the emotional fallout, and the confrontation that shattered everything. But first, consider this. As Kody stood at the altar preparing to welcome Robyn into his plural family, legal documents filed years earlier lay sealed, hidden from public view, documents which, once unsealed nearly a decade later, would explode the illusion he had so fiercely defended. Whilst Kody publicly declared Robyn his redemption, his fresh start after heartbreak, the true story lay quietly entombed inside a courthouse file. And when those records finally emerged, it wasn't gossip, it wasn't speculation, it was allegedly documented deception. So, what if the woman he trusted more than any other had a man before him and had never shared the full truth? Let's rewind to 2010. Kody Brown was still legally married to Mary, though emotionally stretched thin across 3 wives, Mary, Yanel, and Christine. The family was already under scrutiny as TLC's Sister Wives began airing. Then Robyn entered the picture, a divorced mother of 3, soft-spoken, delicate, seemingly wounded. Kody called her healing. What the public witnessed was a tender, romantic courtship that led to a spiritual marriage and, eventually, a legal one. In 2014, he even divorced Mary to marry Robyn officially and adopt her children. To viewers, it appeared to be loyalty, sacrifice, destiny, even love. But what if all of it was built on a lie? Because according to records unsealed in 2023, the timeline doesn't match the glossy narrative shown on television. The documents suggest that Robyn's divorce from her ex wasn't as clean, complete, or honest as she described. They hint that she maintained legal or emotional connections with him for years, perhaps even benefited financially from him whilst simultaneously receiving support from Kody and the Browns. Producers claim the unsealed files paint a very different picture from the one TLC broadcast. Among the most shocking revelations is that a 2007 custody agreement between Robyn and her ex was quietly reopened in 2014, the same year Kody legally married her. Now, on its own, a reopened custody arrangement isn't damning. People co-parent, circumstances change. But the language inside that file is what has raised every eyebrow in the room: repeated references to cohabitation clauses, non-disclosure requirements regarding partners, and the most unsettling line of all, failure to notify the court of a new spouse for the purpose of avoiding judgment lien enforcement. In plain British English, that means someone may have hidden a marriage to prevent the court from garnishing wages or assets to settle outstanding debts or child support. Which leads to the burning question: was Robyn hiding a husband, or was she hiding from legal consequences? Now let's step into Kody's perspective. For over 10 years, he defended Robyn relentlessly, calling her the calm one, the peacemaker, the only wife who showed him respect. But behind closed doors, especially in the past couple of years, cracks have appeared: tension, coldness, isolation. According to insiders, in early 2023 Kody received a phone call that shattered him, an anonymous tip from someone in Robyn's hometown claiming she had been involved in a long-running legal dispute involving a man she had never once mentioned. A man whose name, when spoken aloud, allegedly left Kody frozen. That same name appears in the 2014 court file unsealed only months ago. Now imagine you're Kody Brown. You've divorced your first wife. You've lost spiritual connections with two others. You've sacrificed reputation, finances, and relationships with your own children, all in the belief that one woman was your soulmate. And then you discover a trail of concealed documents suggesting she may have never been honest about who she truly was. This isn't just a family crisis. It's an entire legal contradiction that obliterates the narrative TLC spent years selling to millions. Let's shift briefly to Christine. After leaving Kody in 2021, she often hinted that Robyn was never transparent. In her book and numerous interviews, she described Robyn as manipulative, calculated, and financially opaque. She had no concrete proof until now. Sources claim Christine was among the first to be told about the unsealed documents. Her response, according to production staff, was simple: "I knew it." For Christine, this wasn't jealousy, it was validation. She'd watched for years as Robyn positioned herself as the only loyal wife whilst quietly building a fortress of secrecy. Yanel, upon seeing the documents, was reportedly far more direct. In a filmed segment yet to air, she allegedly turns to Kody and says, "You were legally betrayed, and you owe it to your children to acknowledge it." And when even Yanel sides with Christine, you know the ground has already given way beneath Kody's feet. But the legal labyrinth goes deeper. Hidden within the 2014 case file is an affidavit signed by Robyn's ex, under penalty of perjury, stating that both parties agreed not to disclose certain past cohabitation arrangements to future partners. That sentence is vague, intentionally so, some say. It could refer to something harmless. But in the context of what Kody claims he never knew, the picture grows darker. Because Robyn didn't merely omit a minor legal hiccup. She may have knowingly entered a spiritual or legal marriage without disclosing financial and legal obligations that could have altered everything, from property division to the adoption of her children. And in states like Utah and Arizona, concealing this type of information isn't simply unethical, it can be illegal. Now let's look at the public. Every secret once locked behind a courthouse door now lies wide open, spilling truth into places that were never meant to see daylight. And as Session 2 plunges deeper into the unfolding investigation, the picture becomes darker, more intricate, and far more devastating than even the most skeptical viewer could have predicted. This chapter does not merely peel back layers of paperwork, it exposes the fragile skeleton of trust that once held an entire plural family together. We journey behind the scenes of the alleged anonymous phone call that first tipped Kody off, the moment a single ring fractured the illusion of loyalty he believed he'd built, and the confrontation inside the Flagstaff home that rattled the walls harder than any argument we've ever witnessed on camera, revealing Robyn's controlled composure, Kody's simmering anger, Christine's quiet vindication, and Yanel's blunt, uncompromising truth. But before that storm truly breaks, these next few minutes will permanently alter the way you see this family, and perhaps even the way you interpret every tear, every confessional, every televised claim of harmony ever broadcast on TLC. If you've stayed with us this far, pause for a moment and tell us what you think. Do you believe Robyn deliberately deceived Kody, or is this simply a tangle of messy legal history blown out of proportion? Because it all began with a phone call, one ring, no voicemail, no second attempt, just a single moment that tipped an empire on its side. That morning, early in the spring, Kody Brown paced the long stone hallway of his Flagstaff home, speaking in circles about the remaining parcels of Coyote Pass, muttering about property lines, obligations, and the fragmenting legacy he could no longer control. His voice echoed sharply, a restless, frustrated sound that hinted at exhaustion far deeper than he ever let cameras capture. Then his phone buzzed again, another call, and this time, almost out of irritation, he answered it. On the other end was a voice he hadn't heard in more than a decade, a former legal aide from St. George, Utah, who didn't bother with pleasantries. "Kody, you need to review the 2014 court order. It has been unsealed." In that instant, the air shifted. What would you do if the one person you trusted above all others had lied to you on legal record? Kody did what many would do, he dismissed it as nonsense, perhaps a fan stirring trouble, but hours later an email arrived, and attached were scanned PDFs with official courthouse seals, matching dates, and language that tipped the world on its axis. His hands trembled as he read the opening paragraph. In accordance with the ruling dated the 12th of July, 2014 between petitioner Robyn A. Sullivan and respondent, name redacted, the court notes. Failure to disclose subsequent marital cohabitation during pending litigation may constitute indirect contempt. It was real. And it felt like betrayal. Kody printed every page, sitting at the kitchen island as he combed through all 42 entries, custody revisions, financial disclosures, references to third-party involvement, and allegations of strategic non-disclosure that painted a portrait no husband ever wants to discover about the woman he sacrificed his family for. To an untrained eye the documents would appear bureaucratic, sterile, even dull, but to Kody the meaning was unmistakable. This wasn't simply paperwork, it was a confession buried in omissions. Robyn had never told him about the filing, never mentioned the judge's ruling, never explained why her ex-husband's name remained legally tethered to hers years after she had presented herself as a woman seeking a clean break. And now those receipts lay openly on the countertop. That was the moment when a voice deep within whispered the words no man wants to hear, "You've been played." Hours later, Robyn walked into the kitchen. She hesitated when she saw the stack of papers, and Kody, silent at first, slid the top page towards her with a slow, controlled motion. "What is this?" Her expression barely shifted, but her eyes gave her away. They darted from the papers to the bin, to the window, to the back door, as if searching for an escape. "Kody, I don't know what that is." "You don't know what this is," he replied, his voice not raised but lowered, steady and chilling. He turned to page 6. "This clause here, non-disclosure of cohabitation, this is from your divorce case. And it's from 2014. The same year I legally married you. So why am I only learning about this now?" Robyn reached out as though to take the paper, then stopped, withdrawing her hand with a halting breath. "I didn't think it was relevant," she whispered, but they both knew relevance wasn't the point. It was the fact that she had withheld it entirely. In that moment Kody saw the timeline he'd believed collapse. The version of events shown on television, the tender romance, the promises, the fresh start, cracked like cheap glass, revealing a hidden sequence of omissions, legal entanglements, and choices Robyn had made long before inviting Kody into her version of the truth. She hadn't merely omitted paperwork, she had omitted context, intention, and consequences. And what stung even more was that Kody was not the first to know. 3 weeks earlier, Christine, while attending a women's conference in St. George, only miles from the courthouse where Robyn's original custody case had been filed, was approached by a soft-spoken attendee who hesitated before sharing a truth that would ignite a fuse. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said gently, "but I worked at the courthouse years ago. Something about Robyn's case has been unsealed." Christine did not react outwardly, but privately she requested the document. When it arrived, she sent it straight to Yanel. And that is how the ripple began, long before Kody even knew. The wives who had once raised each other's children and built homes side by side suddenly found themselves reading through legal entries that changed their entire understanding of the woman who had become the center of the Brown universe. Christine's response was quiet. Her message to Yanel was measured. "Look at page 8. It's not just the money. It's the principle." He had been asking himself how much of their life had ever been real, wondering with a kind of dawning horror what it meant if an entire marriage had been built upon a contract he had never even been allowed to see, and as the question settled in the room like a thick, choking fog, Kody didn't speak straight away. Instead, he placed the newly unsealed affidavit on the table, face up, letting it rest for a moment before nudging it towards Robyn with a steady, deliberate motion, the sort of gesture that carried more weight than raised voices ever could. The document, stamped and dated 2015, less than a year after their legal marriage, carried the unmistakable signature of Robyn's ex-husband and declared in carefully crafted, legally binding language that both parties agreed to maintain separate finances and preserve the privacy of their cohabitation history due to pending civil matters, a clause that, crucially, made absolutely no mention of Kody, no acknowledgement whatsoever of her marriage to him, which meant that for at least a year after they wed, Robyn and her ex maintained a private financial understanding that excluded Kody entirely, allegedly and devastatingly. And the most explosive element was that the document had been sealed under a privacy clause tied to a custody arrangement that expired in early 2023, yet Robyn had never disclosed its existence, not to the court, not to Kody, not even casually to any living soul. Her solicitor reached for the paper, skimmed it with an expression that shifted from neutrality to guarded alarm, and uttered just 4 words, This changes the tone. That was the moment Robyn finally spoke, her voice brittle, her words tumbling out with the desperate cadence of someone trying to outrun an avalanche. Kody, I didn't lie. I didn't want to hurt you with old legal rubbish that didn't matter anymore. But it did matter, because it wasn't just paperwork, it was proof that Robyn had kept her past entangled with her ex long after assuring Kody that every tie had been severed, every chapter firmly closed. And in that moment, Robyn wasn't merely his wife, she became, unavoidably, a witness whose credibility was now being measured by legal standards rather than marital trust. Christine saw it all unfold in a way that was almost eerie. She wasn't physically in the mediation room, yet emotionally she was closer to the center of the storm than ever before. The Christine who had once sobbed her way out of the Brown family's orbit, convinced she'd been overlooked, overshadowed, drowned out by Robyn's carefully curated sweetness, was now vindicated by cold, undeniable records. Christine had spent years telling Kody that something about Robyn felt off, too polished in public, too silent in private, too willing to play innocent while slipping away unseen, but Kody had always dismissed those warnings as jealousy. Now Christine didn't need to say a word, because the court documents were speaking with brutal clarity. The affidavit was immediately entered into a new motion filed by Kody's attorney, seeking full financial transparency in all postmarital trusts and joint holdings involving Robyn Brown. This was no longer a family dispute. It had crossed into legal territory, peppered with terms like fraud, misrepresentation, and contempt, territory where feelings held no weight and facts stood like unforgiving sentinels. Kody was no longer the man who once spent his entire life to shield Robyn, he was now a man scrambling to protect himself. And once a man who sacrificed everything begins demanding receipts, the fairy tale is well and truly finished. Robyn began to unravel in front of him, insisting that the affidavit had only existed to ensure her ex couldn't interfere with her new marriage, swearing she had never intentionally hidden anything, repeating over and over that she had only wanted to protect the children from unnecessary drama. But the facts refused to support that version of events, because new evidence had surfaced. A 2015 email, recovered during court discovery, showed Robyn requesting a transfer of £14,000 from a private account into a trust shared with her ex, and the email, now part of the legal files, contained the chilling line, "Please do not disclose to the new household." That final line was the nail in the coffin, because Kody was the new household, and Robyn had deliberately kept him in the dark. Imagine being Kody, a man who had legally adopted her children, sold land, divorced another wife for her dignity, defended her publicly and privately against every whisper of accusation, only to find himself sitting across from her watching receipts cascade across the table like pages from a betrayal scrapbook. And yet his voice remained calm, because this wasn't a televised blow-up designed to entertain. This was court-ordered mediation. There were rules. There were lawyers. There were no dramatic cuts to commercial, no background music swelling, no producer stepping in. Just the quiet, heavy realization that he might have been played by the woman he trusted more than anyone in his life. This was no longer about love. It was about legal exposure. At home, the fallout hit before they even returned. Unsealed phoned Savannah and warned her to stay off social media because the leaks were spreading like wildfire. Online forums had exploded with timelines, screenshots, and theories. Christine's supporters were publishing line-by-line analyses of the affidavit, and YouTubers were thrusting Robyn's past under the spotlight with renewed intensity. Inside the Flagstaff home, Kody slept in the guest room. According to someone close to production, filming resumed 1 week after mediation, but the crew were instructed to remain silent, no chatter, no empathy, no accidental reactions, because they weren't documenting a family anymore. They were documenting a collapse. Robyn refused to film unless it was a staged interview, and Kody's demeanor became clipped, robotic, drained of his usual bluster. In one chilling moment, caught off camera but confirmed by multiple crew members, Kody was overheard saying, "She's not my wife. She's a plaintiff. When your husband calls you a legal liability, the marriage is already dead." And then came the viewer's perspective, the audience who had watched their wedding, the tears, the soft vows, the slow dances, the grand declarations of loyalty, believing perhaps that this time Kody had found the partner he'd always claimed to be seeking. But now the audience, much like Kody, had seen the receipts, the affidavit, the emails, the quiet deceit woven through the seams of their relationship, and the question hanging in the air was no longer about romance, it was about motive. Was Robyn ever truly in this for love? Or had love simply been the safest, most convenient form of protection? To be fair, she wasn't the only one with murky choices. Every member of this family had blurred lines, hidden motives, tangled histories. But legal documents do not lie, and receipts do not weep on camera. And so, in this session, the long-running metaphor of a courtroom became literal. This was no longer emotional theater. It was legal drama with stakes far beyond hurt feelings. Kody was finally confronting the price of being blind in the name of affection. From the moment Unsealed sat at that modest wooden table, fingers gently curled around her mug as if steadying herself against the truth she had long suspected, the tone of the unfolding storm became unmistakably clear. "I kept wondering why Kody wouldn't see it," she murmured, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the decades she had spent stitching together a family that was already fraying, "and now I think he simply didn't want to." Christine, ever the one to acknowledge the unspoken, nodded with a heaviness that felt as old as the marriage itself. "He was so in love with her he couldn't imagine she'd lie," she whispered, and in that single sentence lay the tragedy of the entire saga, that the deepest wounds aren't carved by enemies but by those we believe incapable of hurting us. For this wasn't just a lie, nor was it a fleeting moment of dishonesty. It was a deliberate, meticulously crafted legal architecture designed to keep Robyn in control financially, emotionally, and tactically, while the other wives, branded disloyal, disrespectful, or unruly, were positioned as the problem, the obstacles, the ones failing in faith or unity, all while Robyn played the long game with a smile softened by tears and a paper trail hidden beneath carefully tailored trust. And so, back in the house, Kody sat hunched over a receipt list as though it were a confession he had stumbled upon by accident rather than a revelation years in the making. He wasn't angry, not yet, because anger requires energy, and Kody looked hollow, emptied, like a man reading the autopsy report of a marriage still technically alive. "You told me everything was over," he said quietly, voice rasping with betrayal too large to articulate. "You told me you'd close that chapter." Robyn froze, breath caught in her throat, eyes darting like someone bracing for impact. "I thought if you knew, you'd walk away," she whispered, but Kody's reply sliced straight through the room. "You mean, you knew? That if I knew, I wouldn't marry you?" And in that sharp, echoing silence, the fairy tale finally collapsed. Because love may withstand distance, doubt, exhaustion, or time, but deception is the poison no heart survives. Robyn stood abruptly, hands trembling, insisting everything she did was to protect her children, that she never wanted them caught between two men, dragged into more courtroom battles, weighed down by adult sins they never asked to carry. But Kody didn't blink. "You made me one of those men," he said, steady, cold, and exhausted in a way that suggested he had been carrying another man's shadow without ever knowing it. The camera crew, who had politely remained outside at Robyn's request, was suddenly invited in not because it was necessary, but because Robyn wanted the optics, the framing, the narrative spun in the exact tone she could still control. Looking straight into the lens, she insisted she hid nothing out of malice, only fear that her past would destroy the one good thing she had found. But for those who watched later, the moment fell flat not because the tears weren't real, but because the damage had already seeped through every crack of her carefully curated story. Christine's words from weeks earlier echoed through every comment section. She was never honest. "We just didn't have the documents to prove it." Kody's world unraveled not in a dramatic explosion but in quiet, devastating administrative steps. In the weeks following that confrontation, he filed paperwork of his own, a formal financial audit covering marital holdings, joint business ventures, and every enterprise tied to the woman he had once legally prioritized above all others. This wasn't emotional distance, this was legal warfare. Kody Brown, the man who surrendered his legal marriage to Mary to secure Robyn's future, was now dismantling the very structure he built for her. And when a man starts rewriting a marriage on paper, he has already rewritten it in his heart. What finally pushed him to this irreversible point? A voicemail, anonymous, crackling, the kind of message that arrives like a ghost carrying receipts. The caller claimed to have worked with Robyn's legal team in 2014. She had a contingency plan, the voice said bluntly. There was always an account under her maiden name. Always backup funds. The line dropped before he could respond, But something in that message aligned too perfectly with memories he'd once brushed off. Robyn insisting on managing the children's accounts, insisting on a special trust for future tuition, insisting he not ask questions because she had it handled. And he didn't question it. He trusted her. That trust now felt like leverage he'd never realized he was giving. Meanwhile, Yanel broke her silence with a single, devastatingly simple post on social media, a photo of Coyote Pass and the caption, "Truth always comes back around." Cryptic yet painfully clear. Fans understood instantly, this was no longer a family disagreement. This was a reckoning. Christine didn't gloat, didn't post victory quotes, didn't so much as hint at vindication. She simply lived her life with the quiet dignity of a woman who no longer needed an apology because the documents had delivered what words never could. Sometimes the real revenge isn't rage, it's freedom. Robyn, meanwhile, retreated. Sources whispered she hired both a divorce solicitor and a media consultant within a week, not necessarily to end the marriage, but to brace herself for the avalanche she knew was coming. Because the episodes would air. The documents would leak. And the world would see what she had worked so meticulously to hide. The cameras captured one final scene, Robyn alone on her porch at dusk, hands clasped, voice barely audible as she said, "I tried to protect everyone. Maybe I should have told the truth sooner. Maybe it's too late now." And indeed, once court documents meet daylight, they do not return to the shadows. The present reality is grim. Kody no longer lives full-time in Robyn's home. Christine and Yanel are pursuing legal reviews of assets previously signed under Robyn's influence. Court hearings have been scheduled in Flagstaff, including the possibility of her ex-husband testifying. TLC has already greenlit a special titled The Secrets of Sister Wives, The Robyn Files. But the most explosive twist remains sealed, a financial declaration from 2016 referenced in filings but not yet public. Rumors claim it holds the final truth, the one that may either destroy Robyn's public image or reveal that someone else in the Brown family knew all along. The final hearing wasn't filmed. No cameras, no microphones, no producers scribbling notes. Just a judge, a clerk, and a single sealed file. Kody arrived early, alone, clutching a pen as though preparing for battle, though he had nothing left to prepare. He'd lost wives, children, trust, and his own identity defending Robyn, and now all that remained was the truth he was no longer scared to face. When the judge addressed her as Miss Sullivan, even that small return to her maiden name felt like a cut.